All right, good morning or good afternoon. Welcome back here to Trader Minute. Great to have you aboard. Market's been open here for, well, it has about 2 hours left, and it's been a really interesting day. And it has been one where there have been quite a few news catalysts and pretty much in every major front. We had this morning a big positive for some microchips. Then we had the retail data, which was a general negative. Then we had some Fed speak that was taken as, in fact, you can see the drop and the pop right here as I zoom in, big volume, but really nothing went anywhere. Then we get the Brexit change vote. We get some tweet from U.S. President Trump, and market shifts back up, and the S&P is sitting pretty much flat right now, and it's off of its overnight highs, it's off of its lows that it set early this morning. But materially, what's going on here? Is there some change? Is something really driving? I was asked this morning, hey, gap down in the market, time to get short heavy, let's go. No, no, no. One gap down doesn't a market make, and yes, it had a catalyst, but you gotta see what's gonna be transpiring when the bulls have this much control. You have to see that some of that control is wrestled, and a gap doesn't wrestle that control away. Now, other things, yeah, absolutely. But so far today, we are not seeing control wrestled away from the bulls, right? Let's go take a look at some of this. And one of the things that we saw really early on in the market is when the market opened up and sold off, it was highly differential. Right? We didn't see everything get sold. If it's a bear market move, we see everything get sold. But this morning, we saw Micron trading in the green right just minutes in. In fact, let me pull it up here. I'll pull it up on the just 1 minute chart. You can see Micron gap down a little bit, but boom, it was green right away. We saw Apple, it gapped down a little bit, but it was green right away. We saw some major companies out there just really kind of go green very quickly. The Boeings of the world, we saw the XLK ETF, the tech ETF go green very early. And so while, yes, we were seeing other things in the red, we were seeing some buying come into play here. And that's not typically what you're going to see when the market's going to break down, on a morning gap. And so, yes, there's a catalyst. We talked about that this morning. But at the same time, is there any sign that this is going to have, reverberations, throughout the course of the trading for the next weeks? So far, no, not really, right? And if we go and we break down just some of the metrics, right? We do break down some of the metrics. We look at, small cap performance. Small caps are in the green today, right? We look at transports. They're in the green here today. Are they overextended? Yeah, they are, right? The bears still have their overextended argument, but the bulls still have their, hey, you know what? This keeps staying in the green. The bullish percent index, which, for my money, this is going to be one of the best indicators as far as whether there's a real breakdown in the market or not. And there's zero change in the bullish percent index. The financials, they're holding up, right? They were a little weak. They came off their upper band from yesterday. I was looking at Bank of America yesterday, wondering, do I buy, do I step into it a little? I decided not to, just simply because, the whole XLF was right at the upper band. But, this isn't exactly a bearish breakdown. This is just kind of a remaining consolidation, which for many things for the bulls is where things are. I know I had a conversation with one of you yesterday, and you had a bullish portfolio, and your stuff wasn't going anywhere. A lot of it was just kind of in consolidation, and that's the reality, right? For a lot of things, there's heavy consolidation, and it's hard to look at some of the stocks and you see a CSX moving up and breaking out of consolidation, and then being stuck in some that are consolidating, and there's an aggravation there. But for the bulls, there's about 30% of the stocks that are kind of trending higher, and the rest are kind of consolidating there as far as stocks stocks that are in bullish overall positions. So, no real change in the metrics. I mean, even just simple metric like the number of stocks trading above or below a 7-day moving average, which is one of the first metrics to change. And in fact, this metric is in the market vibe simply because of its reactivity. I mean, it was above 80% yesterday. It's above 80% right now. We aren't seeing stocks breaking down below 7-day moving averages here today. And that is a big deal. That is an important sign for the bears to need, if they're going to take this market lower. And, they're just absolutely not getting it here today. So, what we talked about yesterday in terms of the bearish case, did the bearish case get enhanced a little bit today with a contraction in a little bit of data? Sure. A little bit. But there's not this kind of wrestle away and go that we're seeing in the trading action here today so far. Again, I talk about the weakness of the bearish case, but one of the things I haven't talked about is the limited case for the bulls. So while the bulls control the metrics, I think there's a very limited case to be made of significant upside. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow. We'll go out and take a look at the bullish case for the upside and what that looks like. So overall, just not a lot of real metric change here. A few small day trade opportunities. I haven't really stepped into much here today as I kind of watch some of the action. Be keeping my eye on some of the stocks that have triggered bearish of late and, are pulling back a little today. For example, in Alcoa, which triggered bearish last week for me. All right, it's bouncing off the upper band. It's rallying. Okay, when do we get a breakdown? Today's the first day where the stock is trading below the low from the prior day, since the bounce. And so I have to look at that and I go, okay, am I interested in stepping in and shorting that? For my money right here, right now, no, not yet. The volumes aren't there, and I'm not seeing any major breakdown in the broader market. So, do I really want that? Do I really want that exposure? We go take a look at some other things that had some bearish elements associated to it. We're not talking about breakdowns. A Microsoft, for example, it's just not there. The EWW, the Mexican ETF. Had a real rough day yesterday. We talked about this on Monday and Tuesday, but real rough day yesterday. It's snapping back a little bit here today as, U.S. President Trump tweets that, he's still mulling and their staff is still looking at the budget deal. But, we aren't seeing any sort of major bearish breakdown continuation in some of the stocks that have kind of posed a little bit bearish. With Disney, which we talked about on this drop day. You don't short Disney on a big drop day. You just don't. It tends to bounce and then maybe get that secondary leg, and it tends to have a secondary leg lower when the upside is on low volume, and we're seeing that so far here in Disney. But we're not getting any kind of downside follow through. Even a Morgan Stanley, which has been one of the weaker banks, reversed yesterday, gap down today. There's no follow through selling in it. There's just zero follow through selling. And so, while yes, I think it's a very difficult case to make that, hey, Morgan Stanley's ready for a big move higher. We aren't seeing the sellers really be able to grab hold and and take anything in any sort of significant manner. Even a Halliburton, which gave me some bearish signals here this week, just simply popped off the lower band, and is bouncing. We talked about Schlumberger, and it's kind of, popped back above the 7-day moving average, but just really hasn't been able to go anywhere ever since. And there's a lot of things that are, in very similar situations, here today. I've been looking at AMD, especially for the challenge. I would love to play some puts on it. I just haven't had the signal yet. Just have not had the signal yet to go and to do that here for the challenge, and so we'll wait on that, and and go after that if and when it starts to come into play. As far as some potential new signals here today, there's some things like an AIG that's piercing the lower band. This is a stock that the last 3 times it's pierced the lower band, it's had a significant drop in it. And when you look at banks and you look at bank valuations, a lot of the banks are cheap. AIG is not. It's not as fundamentally solid as some of the others out there, and definitely some downside follow through, more probable than not, in my opinion. But overall, I'm not jumping in it right here. But, we see things like an Iron Mountain, which is in kind of that specialty REIT area, pushing into the lower Bollinger Band. Something like an Emerald Expositions, breaking down on news here today. Redwood Trust, which is a mortgage REIT, piercing into the lower band. But nothing where the options are all that tradable here. A Sabre Corp, which is a travel company, breaking on down a little bit today, but just not a heck of a whole lot amongst some of the major names. A lot of things kind of like an American Airlines, which is something that I have an eye on the bearish side. I was watching it this morning. You see the MACD starting to push on down, starting to go negative. It's just going that way because of consolidation, not because of breakdown. When we start to take out some of these lows here, to see AAL drop down to this lower Bollinger, I think is a very path of least resistance type play, but no confirmation there just yet. And so from a bearish standpoint, looking at things and, looking at some of the stocks that are out there, it's something where you can make the same arguments you've been able to make all week, but just no real confirmation, here just yet, with pretty much all of them. On the bullish standpoint, I think it's still one of those where, if you're bullish on Caterpillar and you've wanted in, is today a decent place to get in? Yeah, you can get in. Just use this morning's low as a stopping point. And I think that's really where, any entry to the upside, that's where it comes in. You want to go out buy an Apple? Yeah, I can't argue against it, right? Personally, I think path of least resistance is going to be lower for Apple. But if you want to buy it, use today's low as a stopping point. It sets up a decent risk reward to get upside exposure, if that is what you are looking for out there. So there's some of that out there, but a lot of things are just kind of like a GM. You see contracting Bollinger Bands, in a stock that is pretty much in a contraction mode rather than some sort of trend mode. Right where it sits right now. So I don't think that's going to change for a lot of stocks. And I know there's this kind of, yes, we've had a lot of news today. We've had a lot of, noise in the markets. And yes, that stuff is significant. But we aren't seeing price action that is changing from price action that we have seen overall, in the markets of late, meaning the bulls still have control of the metrics, and they still have firm control of the metrics, and the bears really haven't gotten any of it today. They have not been able to crawl back anything here today in terms of the metrics, and does that mean boom, the market's going sizably higher? No, I don't think so. It's one of those where we don't typically see a market vibe number this high with a signal as neutral, but that's what we see, and so that tells me the consolidation risk is extremely high, and the downside, getting priced in over the course of the next week or two is also a very substantial or very realistic possibility. But to say, hey, market's breaking and here it goes. No, we just absolutely can't say that, here. Now, this morning we had some news that printed in the Wall Street Journal about China making some concessions to the U.S. and being willing to buy a lot of microchips. right? And being willing to step in and be a net buyer of a lot of Micron chips and AMD chips, and this kind of on the heels of yesterday with Google talking about building a few new data centers, and those take a lot of chips, and so we saw the Microns of the world up nicely yesterday. AMD kind of sold off after the news, but these things started off strong here this morning. And you look at them and you go, okay, any follow through? I mean, the market's been climbing back ever since. Well, these stocks have kind of, they made their highs back when the market was at its low, right? And they've been ticking on down while the market's been ticking higher. So just that high level of differentiation, really remains out there in the market right now. Now, for the challenge, I still have one position, and I'll talk about it more in depth tomorrow when we go look at challenge positions. I have cash that I'd like to get aggressive with. I will look to get a little aggressive if we sell off into the close. If we don't sell off into the close, I just won't have any signal trigger there for a good risk reward that I will be comfortable with and comfortable going after. But if we sell off into the close and we have one of these days where we sell the open and we sell the close, I might, be more willing to get aggressive. But, if we're just kind of dinking around a little bit and, maybe drift down into the close or drift up into the close, I'm not going to, I'm not going to step in any, in any substantial way here and, and change things up in any material way for the challenge. All right, so those are some of the things that I'm looking at here. The TLT is interesting, especially if you're strongly bullish or strongly bearish. If you're strongly bullish, TLT lower. If you're strongly bearish, TLT higher. Ultimately, TLT to me does need some consolidation, but when we have some of the data like what we could start to see emerge here, especially as we start to get some of the February PMI numbers here into next week, it definitely could be a catalyst to move the TLT in a substantial way. Thanks for hopping on. Have yourselves a great one, and we'll talk to you later. Take care.